Robert Schoch out of Boston University, the geologist who examined the erosion in the Temple of the Sphinx and determined it to be thousands of years of rainfall, and which would predate the Sphinx by quite a bit. Very clear that it was carved out. And you see these massive fissures that look exactly like water erosion. He specifically said that he showed these images to other geologists without telling them what they were looking at, and they almost unanimously said that it was water erosion over thousands of years of rainfall. And then when he would show them exactly what he was telling them to describe, then they didn't want to have any part of it, because they're like, okay, now you're saying something that's really crazy, because now you're saying that this structure is 11,000 years old as opposed to 4,500 years old.
The notion that the Sphinx was an evolution of an idea that the late, great John Anthony West brought Robert Schoch to the Giza Plateau. And Robert took a look at the erosion around the Sphinx and eventually came to the conclusion that the best explanation for it was that this Sphinx enclosure had been subjected to at least 1,000 years of extremely heavy rainfall. And Robert Schoch right now puts that back to around the 10,000 BC date, 12,000 plus years ago, during the Younger Dryas, when indeed there were heavy rains. In my opinion, the geological evidence on the antiquity of the Sphinx is strong. There's no doubt that the ancient Egyptians were there, that they did work on the Sphinx.
How do we date the Sphinx? What that comes from is largely radiocarbon dates from the pyramids themselves. So pieces of wood that were in between the blocks of the pyramids have been radiocarbon dated and definitively tell us that the pyramids were built during the Old Kingdom, right?
If they were constructed 12, 13, 20,000 years ago and people were still inhabiting them 5,000 years ago, wouldn't it make sense that they would do things to them?
Well, we have inscriptions in there from areas that are sealed off from the actual construction, graffiti from the workmen referring to, for example, Friends of Khufu and different workmen gangs that are in there. Versions of Khufu's name that were not known until later by scholars. The Sphinx is just hewn out of natural stone, right? These different layers here. So the reason we know is because geochemists have done stone sourcing on the chemistry of these stones in the pyramids. And they've been able to trace them to different quarries at Giza. And so they've taken samples from the quarries themselves and from the stones in the pyramids. They do different kinds of geochemical analyses to show the ratios of, in this case, magnesium and iron. And then they trace them back to specific quarries there. And so they know that a bunch of the stones from Khafre, for example, come from the area of the Sphinx. The Sphinx is from a quarry. It's a quarry site for those stones.